Hello there, everyone who is watching this video on YouTube. I am going to show all of you how to make a Five Nights at Freddy's fan game on Clickteam Fusion. So, the main reason I'm doing this is because most tutorials on Clickteam are, well, they have two problems. They're either really old and outdated, or they use really bad and unoptimized methods of doing things, and also all the tutorials just generally have like not much in terms of actual detail. Like if you're trying to learn how to do some like actually really useful stuff, a lot of the time you're just not going to find them on YouTube. So, I'm going to provide people with an actual well, I mean, I'm assuming obviously at some point it's gonna be outdated, in the future, but for the time being, not outdated and actually reliable kind of tutorial. And also, I'm gonna actually show people a good chunk of like features that most people don't usually like to showcase in the tutorials. Because I really want to expose a lot of people who are getting into this engine with a lot of useful stuff that is gonna help, like, a lot. So, when you open up Clickteam, obviously, this is going off of the impression that you haven't really touched the software, because, I mean, let's be honest here, most people aren't going to use this unless they're trying to make a FNaF Fangame. So, you open up with this. I think there's like a pop-up that has a bunch of like dumb Clickteam stuff that I've just disabled automatically, but it's basically the same. So to make a new game, we're just gonna go to File up here and press New. So here is our application. So, right in this little section here is gonna be our workspace toolbar. This is going to be, and I'm showing this now because one of the first things that I like to do as soon as I start making a new project is I like tampering with the settings of the application specifically. So there's a few things that I usually like to change, so I'll go over those kind of quickly here. So this bar towards the bottom left kind of is going to be your properties tab. It's going to be this one that has properties at the top. And then there are several different like areas that you can toggle, and of course you just all this different stuff. So usually, I keep most of this stuff here in the settings, or it's called. Well, that is called settings. The settings section, I guess, is what I'm gonna call it. I keep most of this the same. I usually turn off optimize play sample, and the reason why is because sometimes this causes some sound to play a bit later if your game is like, running a lot of stuff at once. Just stuff to, I guess I don't need to turn it off right now, but just stuff to keep in mind. In the Windows section, though, one of the things that you usually always want to change is the size of your game. Now, for this tutorial specifically, we're going to be just remaking FNaF 1, but of course doing things a bit differently because FNaF 1's programming is not the best. So FNaF 1's aspect ratio is 1280 by 720, so we'll change it to that. So we'll just change those two values. You can select each of those individually. Then we'll press enter, and then you'll get this pop-up asking basically if you want to apply that to all of the levels or frames of your game. Usually you do, so we'll do that. Now you can see in this little section how it is now by 1280 by 720, which is good. That's what we want. And then everything else is kind of, the same. Only thing to really keep in mind is if you want to go full screen. I can show this to you guys later, but it basically involves tampering with these two settings. There's also a different way to do that is a bit more optimized though. And then if we go over to runtime options, there are a couple other things that we can change here. One of the things that I want to showcase first is right below display options in this segment right here with in display mode. Now, depending on what version of Clickteam that you have, if you only have just the standard version of Clickteam, the furthest that your game is gonna have is gonna be Direct 3D9 or DX9 as it's called for short. But if you got the 2.5 Plus DLC, as obviously I have, because I have both 2.5 Plus and Developer at this point, you can also have DX11. It should, every time that you make a new application in 2.5 Plus, it should just automatically snap to DX11, but if for whatever reason it doesn't, make sure to do it as that. The reason I say this is because all of the OG FNaF games were made before the 2.5 Plus DLC even came out, and thus it was capped at DX9. DX9 just makes the different levels and things that have to load in Clickteam a lot slower. It's why when, you know, in the FNaF games, when it's trying to load into, like, the office and stuff, it takes a while because DX9 is so bad. But with DX11, it'll go by much faster. Sometimes it'll still need to load, but it won't be as stupidly long. And then other thing too, there's a setting under sound options here called play sounds over frames, which usually I like to have on by default, and that's going to be important. I should also, I guess, specify what frames are. So basically, in our primary window here, so we're currently in the storyboard editor. So this is going to be kind of like the display of all the different levels or frames, as they're called in Clickteam. It really depends on what you want to call it. I'm just going to call them frames because that's what I'm used to. But basically, we can make more frames. So if we press this button here, so basically the letter, or not the letter, the number right below the most recently created frame, we can make another one. We're of course going to delete this because we don't need another frame right now. We just need the one. But basically, each frame is kind of like a level. So of course you can switch back and, you know, you can switch in between them to wherever you want. I'm not the best at explaining things. I'm sorry if I'm taking a while with this. I just kind of want to showcase a lot of different settings that I think are going to be important to start off with before we really like get into things. Just stuff that I start off with. There is more, but to kind of start off with the basics, I guess. So now that we have our application settings all set up, now we need to actually start making our game. So the first thing that we need to do is edit our title. We'll just click on the text here. We'll call this the menu because that's what we're going to be doing. Now we're going to click on the frame itself and alter some of these settings now. So for each frame, you can also alter these settings. The only one that I usually change right away is the one called background color. This is basically just asking what you want the display of the frame itself to be. So obviously you'll have like images and stuff in front here, you know, all around the game. But let's say that you don't have images that cover the whole frame. It basically just asks what color do you want it to display. Usually we choose black, and as you can see, if we change this back to white, that'll change in the display of this as well. So we'll change this back real quick. And now we want to actually go into the frame to start adding stuff. So to do that, we can either double click on this, and this will go right away to what we call the frame editor, or you can just click on this button and it'll take you right to there. Either way works. So now we are basically all set to just start adding stuff in. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to add an object. So to do this, you can right click anywhere on the screen and then select insert object, or you can also just do Control J, which is the default hotkey for making this thing pop up. Now, What's important to note is if you just got Clickteam, you are not going to have this many objects. Most of these are really specific things that are used for very specific things. So you're not going to have most of these, but the object that we're looking for is going to be this one called active. This is going to be your common, images or animation object. Basically the common object that you're going to be using for most of the stuff in your game. Depending on how complex your game is, active objects will make up about 60 to 90% of the total amount of different objects in your game. Maybe even more if you really don't want to use any other of these other things for other specific things. So, anyways, to select that, we're just going to double click this. And now, it didn't apply right away, but that's because the game is letting us choose where we want to put it. Doesn't really matter where, but I'll just click here. And just like that, we just put in an active. The default image here is going to be this little diamond thing. So of course, we can change that too. So we'll double click on the active object and go into the object editor. We'll be able to change some of the things about the object's appearance and animation and stuff. So to do that, we're going to click on our import option. We're going to have to actually... I got to go back a bit because I was saved quite a bit. So I'm going to go over to my FNaF 1 image dump here real fast. Go to the menu, background, and here we are. So all we got to do is just select. We will press enter, of course. And now we are at the import options screen, so we can change some settings with the image itself before we put it on here. Transparent color is interesting because let's say that you have an image and it has the background of it is a specific color and you don't want that to be imported with the image, like you want it to be transparent. Like let's say that for whatever reason we wanted Freddy, we didn't want any of the black in the background to import, even though that's what looks natural. So what we can do is we can simply change the color. We could double click on the square and change it to whatever. Usually though, you just want to import the image as is, so we'll do it as a color that usually doesn't appear in images. So for me, it's this like bright pink that usually I don't have when I'm importing images. And then there's a couple other things to change as well, but they're not really important. I'll go over these a bit later because with these, it's kind of a lot. So just for right now, we'll call this good and just press enter. And there we go. There's our image. And that's basically, well, actually, no, we'll need to put in the, the frames where he's switching, of course. So we'll need to add a couple more frames. We can right click on here and just press new frame to add a new one. And we will select the next one. And let's say that you get tired of having to meticulously import every single frame. We can select this option called Import as Animation. Now, the thing is that this has to be, if you're trying to import multiple images at once in a specific order, the images themselves have to be in some kind of numerical order. So let me show you guys what I'm talking about. So you notice how in the order that these images are listed as, it starts as 439, then goes to 440, 441, 442. So each image, like the name itself, goes up by one. This is how Clickteam detects on being able to import multiple images at once if you're trying to do that. It saves a lot more time doing it like this if you have multiple images to import, and it's just generally a good thing to know. The last thing that we got to do, I actually just took off the first one. Let me just re-add that again. Alright, there we go. That was my mistake. Okay, so now we have our 4 different images of Freddy. Last thing we got to do, if we go over to direction options down here, this can change the speed of the animation if we want this to actually play an animation, as well as if we can loop it, and then if we do loop it, we can change which frame to go back to if it does loop. But we're not doing that. As a matter of fact, we're going to set this to 0, which is basically just going to make these images stagnant and not move at all, which is perfect because the animation is not going to be an actual, like, looping animation. It's going to randomly select between these 3 frames and then go back to the first one. So once you're done, you can press OK or press Enter. As you can see, it changed. So when we have our objects selected, they will also have their settings on the Properties tab. So if we go over to Size and Position, we can change the position of this. We want this, of course, to be centered since it covers the whole frame. So we can I'm going to just change these to 0 and 0 because from my settings, that'll perfectly align. But if you really did want to align them perfectly, then there's an easy way to do that in Clickteam as well. You can right-click on the image, go over to Align and Frame, and then we can select Horizontal Center and then Vertical Center. Of course, this doesn't work right now because it's already in the middle of the frame, but, you know, similar idea if it wasn't. And then, of course, you know, I'm sure this is probably obvious, but name your objects. You can do this, of course, by having your object selected, pressing F2, because that's usually the hotkey for naming stuff. Or you can even just right-click on it, press Rename. And even in the Properties tab, if you go to your About section, you can just rename it there. So all pretty easy stuff to do. Now, we have our image, but we want to put some actual code into it. This is where the coding part comes in, and we can go to the event editor, except that I lied, because if I was evil and wanted to showcase code like this, then I would be using this. But instead, we're going to actually go over to what is known as the event list editor. Now, I actually do use the event editor when I'm doing stuff, you know, seriously. But because I want to really visualize the code for you guys, I'm going to use the event list editor so that way you guys are not as confused about kind of what's going on. Because most people tend to prefer the event list editor anyway, so I'm just going to go ahead and use that. So basically, all we got to do to add code is just click on New Condition, and we have our options readily available to us like this. So the first thing that we're going to want to do is, the only thing that we have right now is Freddy in the background, and we want to make him twitch. So what we're going to do is we are going to, at random, make him choose one of the 3 images where he's twitching. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go over to the timer here, and we're going to select every. Now, as you can probably tell, this is going to check for every whatever amount of time we select. It is then going to run the rest of the code. So for example, where we have it set right now, it'll check for this every 1 second. And then we can change this, of course, to be however long. However, there's something really interesting we can do with this. And if we click on this button that says use a calculation, we can actually change things up a bit. So instead of making it simply say, okay, well, wait for every 1 second, because that's kind of repetitive, we don't really want that, we can instead randomize how long it takes for it to run this event. So this is a bit confusing, so I'll try to keep it as simplistic as I can. So up here, where it says enter the time in 1/1000th of a second, basically, in this editor, because at this point, this is going to be your primary like equation box right here. So this is the stuff where you already type stuff down, and it does funny things. That's basically what this is for. So in the context of checking for time here, when it says enter the time in 1/1000th of a second, basically what it means is if we put down 1,000 here, it basically equals 1 second. So if I press enter right now and apply this, notice how we now made a new line of code. And basically what every 1,000 means is every 1 second. Now obviously we could have just done that in the first screen where it was actually asking for, you know, seconds, minutes, hours, stuff like that. But usually we don't use the every timer event like this if we're just going to have it be checking for every certain amount of time consistently. Usually want to do this if we want this number to actually vary. So we want the event where it checks the twitch to be randomized. So the best way to do that is if we go over to this selection of buttons. There's a lot of different things we can do with this, but right now what we're interested in is the random range. Not random, but random range specifically. And random range is really, really neat because basically it's checking, it's going to pull a number between two different numbers. So if I put down, for example, 1 at the beginning here, and then where it says maximum, we delete all this and then put 10, it will choose a number between 1 and 10. Now, if we use just the random function and put down 10, this is a bit confusing because some people think that maybe it's checking for a random number between 1 and 10. Well, it's actually checking for a random number between 0 and 9, which is confusing. I don't know why it's listed out like this myself. This is usually why I use the random range function, because it's a lot easier to visualize like this. So, basically, we want to check for every random amount of time to, you know, have Freddy here be doing his little twitching thing. So, what we're going to do is I'm just going to do a random selection of numbers. So 50 seconds, which is going to be like 0.05 seconds, I believe. And then we'll do like 1,000 seconds, which again is going to be 1 full second with the scaling that the every timer uses. And we'll press OK. So that is going to be our first condition right here. So now that's just checking. That is just a condition. So anything where it is checking for stuff, any line of code where it's just checking is going to be a condition. And code where it actually implements stuff and makes stuff happen is going to be an action. So now we're going to press the insert your action here code, and we are going to select on Freddy here. And already we've got like a ton of different options, right? Like we've got movement, position, direction, animation. All this stuff will be used, but we're not worried about all these right now. Instead, all we want to do is go over to animation, since what we're changing is part of his actual animation. Hover over change, and then go to animation frame. Now you may be thinking, well, don't you want to go to animation sequence? That's what we're changing. Well, no. You see, technically, all of the different images of Freddy are in the same sequence. If we try to change the sequence, that makes no sense. Instead, we're going to go to animation frame because we are just specifically changing one of the frames. So, what's important to know about animation frames is that they have a 0 index, which means that the first frame is actually going to be 0. So let's say that we put in 0 here, or actually, I'll put in 1 instead. That'll be a better example. So let's say that we just want to test this out and say, oh, well, we want Freddy to change to his first frame of the animation. You would think that it'd be 1. It actually says here, first frame is number 0. So it actually starts at 0. So instead, what we're going to do is, we're not going to just make it change to either 1, 2, or 3, because again, we don't really want consistency. We want it to be kind of truly random. We are instead going to go back to our random range option and have this be our random 1 to 3, because 1 is our second frame, 2 is going to be our third frame, and then 3 is going to be our fourth frame, so it will choose between either 3 of the twitching images that Freddy has. And that is it. So if we click on this button up here, titled Run Frame, you can also just press F7 to do this too. You can see every certain amount of time, it will now change the image that he displays. Now, of course, you know, that's not quite right. We don't want him to just stay in that image. We want him to very quickly go back to his first one, because that's the whole point of him like twitching in and out of the states. So now what we're going to do is we're going to make another new condition at the very bottom here, right below the first one. And this time, we're going to select Freddy as our condition. And basically what we're going to do is we're going to check if Freddy's state is not on his first image. So we'll go to animation and we'll click on compare current frame of BG to a value. Remember, it's not going to be greater than 1 because remember, it's 0 index. So 0 is actually the first frame. So we'll check for if the image, if the frame of Freddy is going to be greater than 0. And we'll insert our action. And all that we're going to do, well actually here, hang on, before I do that, we need to add another one. Because if we just do this, it's going to change this in the very next frame to the point where we're not even going to be able to see the change of him twitching. So instead, we got to make another condition that adds something else so that way this doesn't just change automatically. So what we're going to do is we're going to right click on the hold on. I'm not too familiar with the event list editor, so depending on where you click, it gives you like new pop-ups and stuff. So click on basically what just says add a new condition. Sometimes it'll be insert if you click on the text itself, but if you click on an area of it where it is a bit, whoops, allow me to press that, where there isn't really text, or better yet, if you just click on the number and press add a new condition, then you will be able to just add another one on top of what you have. So basically, we are now going to select the timer event again, press every, and do the exact same thing that we were doing, except in our random range event, we're going to make this be a lot less time. So we're talking like 5 to like 50. Again, this may be too short, but we can always just change this later. And now what we're going to do is we're going to select Freddy, go over animation, change, and change the animation frame back to 0 or his first frame. And now let's run it and see what happens. So that seems a bit too fast. We want it to be a little more varied than that. So we'll do like 150 so that at times it can linger a bit more. So there we go. That looks a lot better. Looks a bit more like the actual OG game right there. All right, and that is basically just the twitching, of course. So now, the first thing we're gonna want to do now is make another object, and we are gonna want to put some static in. So what we're going to do is we are going to make another active object, and now we're going to import static, which should be in this folder. Yep. So again, notice how these are all labeled 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They're all like numbered like this. This is that way, instead of having to import each frame individually, we can just select the import as animation option. and we have all of them imported like this. So since the static is an actual animation that we want to have play out in loop, we are going to go to the direction options that we were at earlier, and we are going to select the loop option right here. And this is basically just going to make the static loop. So as you can see here, it tells you which frame you're on. As you can see, it just keeps looping back and forth. If you want to test out how your animation looks, at the bottom right here, there is a play button. You can select that to see how it looks. Now, this is a bit, you know, it's fine, but it's a bit slow. So we'll change the speed to the max, which is going to be 99 in this case. And that looks a lot smoother already. So now we are done here, and we're going to simply have this be at the center, just like how Freddy was. Now, of course, if we run this now, you will see that it's not right, because of course, the static is over Freddy. It is not semi-transparent at all. We can't see him. So to do that, we need to go over to our display options, and at this setting, called blend coefficient, this is basically your transparency. So it can be anywhere as low as 0 to anywhere as high as 255. Now, 0 is where it is not transparent at all. It is completely visible. It will block everything in front of it or behind it. But 255 is, of course, when it is completely invisible. We can't see it at all. So we want it to be somewhere in between. So we'll do something like 175, where it's a bit closer to being not visible, but to the degree where we can clearly see that static is there. And we'll just name this because, again, like I said, name your objects. If you don't name your objects, I will be very sad. And that's all I have to say about that. Now, if you know anything about FNaF 1, you may think that this looks good, but the static's transparency actually changes a bit. So, what we're going to do now is we're going to go to the event list editor, and I'm going to show you guys a cool little trick that you can do here. So, let me actually see if this works. It does work in the list editor too. Perfect. So, what we can do here is we can drag a condition, and we can, if we drag it and if we drop it where the next box with the number line of code is, we can actually just copy that whole condition down there. It's basically like copying and pasting, but without any actual work. So it's pretty cool. I'm just going to change these values to be something else. That way it's a bit not as varied as the twitching, but still to be about different enough so that way it doesn't look, you know, consistent with everything else changing. And basically what we're going to do is make a new action, click on our static, and change its transparency. So to do that, we're going to go over to Effect and hover over Alpha Blending Coefficient. Now, for some reason, the name of this changes. So sometimes it's called Blending Coefficient, sometimes it's called Alpha Blending Coefficient. They're the same thing, so it doesn't matter. So click on that, and of course we're going to change this to a random specific number. So this, of course, can be anywhere as low as 0 to 255. So we're going to change it about as low as, say, 160 and have it be as high as like 205. Just doing random numbers here at this point. Other thing too is, you know, once you get far enough where you feel like you can actually start like making your own games with this engine, do not just do what I'm doing. Experiment. Do like different like numbers. If you find something that you want to try out, just do it. Like I want to encourage experimentation with these tutorials. I don't want people to just be blatantly doing what I'm doing once they are at a stage where they can make fan games on their own. Because something that I notice is that developers who are starting out kind of seem to like over rely on specific methods, which is not good. If you have a lot of knowledge in mind, if your knowledge is vast, then you should be able to like experiment and do a lot of things with it. So like I said, just because I'm doing a specific thing does not mean that you should be doing it too. Like, you shouldn't be doing just the numbers that I'm doing and, thinking that this is the only way to do things. Well, it's not. Most of these numbers are just things that I'm pulling out of my butthole, frankly. Like, obviously sometimes your game is not going to have it where the character only has just 3 twitching animations, or it's gonna have other stuff that isn't showcased in the tutorial that's slightly different. So experiment once you get to that point. Obviously, if you're just starting out and need to understand how it all works, that's fine. But as we get further along, I'm going to be less structured and kind of more free form. And that's really going to be because I want people to not fully just follow everything I'm doing. I want them to experiment and be trying things to their own accord. All right? So, we have our static, we have our background. Now let's add some text. We're going to go to Insert Object again. Now this time, instead of an active object, we're going to instead go to the bottom here and do a string object. This is basically just text. It literally doesn't do much else. I'm going to actually change the position here. Again, if you want to change the position of an object manually, instead of trying to just shift it based off of, the line sections, like align it left or middle or right. If you want to change it manually, it is going to be under the size position options in your object settings. So like that, it's easy. And you can also change the width and the height too. And the angle, though, with text, you can't actually do that. But you can do that with normal active objects. So, anyways, with the string, there are a few more things you usually need to have set up. So if we go over to the text options, which is a setting that is specific to the string itself, you have quite a few things you can change. Of course, the font may not be what you want to do. I got a ton of fonts here. So I think this will work as the text. I actually don't know what the FNaF 1 text looks like. Oh well, who cares? So we'll do this. This can be whatever font you want, whatever font you have in your catalog. I also, if there is a specific font that you find online that you want to use, you can usually download it, and as soon as it is in your computer, you can select it in Clickteam. It is very nice. Just know that some fonts may not show up in the string. We have a workaround around that I can show you guys in the future. Like I have the, manga font here. I don't even know why I downloaded this. I just have it for some reason. Basically, we'll select this font. You can have it be bold, italic, underline, strike out, whatever. And then, of course, you can change the color of the text. We'll make this white because we cannot see black text in a mostly dark background. Now, of course, it looks all messed up, but thankfully, if we click again on this object, so not double click because it does this, but if we click on the object, wait a second, then click again, we can change the width and the height with these little boxes, which is very cool. I think I actually need to make this a bit smaller now that I think about it. There we go. Hopefully that's good. We'll see in a second. Okay, so now if we go over to the settings here, which is going to be that gear icon, we can change what the text actually displays. So in this case, it's going to want to be Five Nights at Freddy's because this is the title. So we're going to make that a bit... I think this actually needs to be... There we go. That's better. This may actually need to be bigger now that I think about it. I don't think this is exactly the font, but again, this isn't 100% a full, accurate recreation. I'm just remaking the first game like off scratch. There actually is like text. Most of the text in FNaF one is actually just images, but there's a good reason that I'm doing this text with a string object specifically, and that's because of storage. You see, the big problem with Clickteam is that images and sounds can take up a lot of storage, so if you have an opportunity that you don't need to use an image for stuff, then don't use it, because it can add up really badly. And I mean, I don't think it's as big of a problem because I heard that Clickteam actually raised their storage limit from 2 gigabytes to 4 gigabytes. But I believe that even with that, if you still have more than 2 gigabytes worth of storage in your game, it still causes problems with the game itself. So it's just generally not a good idea to do that. So but usually, you know, if you're making a FNaF fan game, you usually don't need to worry about that kind of thing, unless it's a really, really big game with a lot of animations and characters and stuff, which FNaF 1 definitely does not have, so we're fine. But if you have a fan game and it's very intensive in terms of visuals, then you definitely got to be more careful. Okay, so we don't need to do anything with this. Of course, I'm going to name this title. And now we're going to, I can actually show you guys something really neat. I'll show this now. So if we right click on an object, we have an option to do one of two things. We can either clone this object or we can duplicate it. One of these two options here. Cloning an object is basically making an entirely new object just with the groundwork of all the settings of the object that we're copying from. So as you can see, this is title and this is title 2. As you can see, if we change like the text, it only changes this one. So this is what cloning an object does. I'll explain more in depth what duplicating an object does, but just know that they are much different. So anyways, this is going to be, whoops, I suppose I did not have that selected as I presumed. Basically what we're doing is we are now making our actual buttons, which is very nice. I'm gonna have this be a bit smaller, I think. This is gonna be buttons. This is gonna be if it's not fully accurate to the UI, it's fine. I don't care that much about accuracy. We'll change the position a bit. So now I'll show that off later. I was about to say I can show you some of these options to do with this, but no, we'll save that for a later video. Okay. Actually, this is actually perfect because I can show you guys what duplicating does. So cloning an object, which is basically just making an entirely new object just with the groundwork of the previous object. Duplicating object is making another of the same exact object. So as you can see, these are both called buttons because these are the same object. There's just 2 of them now. So, and this is because we could have just made several different objects with these buttons, but I'm going to show you guys something really cool that I'm sure most tutorials probably don't even know about. But first, we gotta make some new text for the continue game button, 6 night, and custom night. So these are just gonna be in paragraphs. So of course, in the settings where our text is, we can make a new paragraph. This can be continue, and we'll just have a total of 4 of them. And something that I was doing that I feel a bit guilty of was when I was doing the first tutorial, I was kind of going a bit slow. And that was because I was thinking, well, I'll need to go slow for people because a lot of people are probably going to have to learn this stuff. And then I realized I'm going way too slow with this. I need to, you know, kind of pick things up. And people can pause the video. They can go back and see my mouse moving at the buttons. And I mean, you know, I trust people enough who are serious about this kind of thing to, if they feel like it's going a bit too fast, that they'll go back and look at what I'm doing. If they didn't catch it the first time, I trust you guys enough with that. So now, we're gonna make 2 more of these, by the way. So basically, when we make a duplicate object or a clone object, because it's the same settings for them both, rows is going up or down. So I think I think that's is that vertical or horizontal? I always get the two mixed up. And then columns is left to right. So rows, this is checking for how many of each object we want. This is confusing because these are both at 1 by default, but you can also make them 0. And that's because 1 doesn't make any new instance. As you can see, nothing happened. But if we go to 2, if we raise to 2, then it makes 1 more. I don't know why Clickteam did it like this. I think it's a bit confusing for newer people, but just keep that in mind. So if you're trying to make a duplicate or a clone of an object, oh yeah, and row spacing and column spacing is how many pixels away from the object that it is duplicating or cloning from you want it to be. But we're not messing with that right now because we want it to be like right next to each other. Okay, so we have our paragraphs, we have our 4 instances of our buttons, but of course, they all say new game and we can't do anything with that. We want them to say new game, continue, 6th night, and custom night. But how are we going to do that if they are all the same object and are going to display the same thing? Well, I'm about to show you guys something very interesting. So let's go over to our setting called values. And we are about to change something known as an instance value. So instance values are actually a newer thing that Clickteam has made recently. And it has specifically to do with objects that are duplicated. Now you can use instance values for anything. I'm pretty sure every single object in Clickteam has instance values, so you can use them for a lot of different things. But what's sad is a lot of people don't know about them, and they're so useful. So let me show you something. So the issue with duplicated items is if you try changing a value or something about just one object, unless you go out of your way to really specify it in the code, it's going to change every single one. So let's say I wanted to change this paragraph to paragraph 2. Problem is, it's going to change all of these to paragraph 2, and everything breaks. However, what's neat about instance values is I can change this to 1, so that first button now has an instance value of 1, and if I go to the second one, it's still 0. So what's really neat about instance values is even if you have the same object like this, these will not change throughout the duplicated objects, which is really awesome. So what we're doing right now is we are going to change these instance values to 1, 2, 3, and 4. This is actually the only time that I do want you guys to follow exactly what I'm doing, because I don't know if there really is another way to do it like this with what I'm about to do, but just follow along with what I'm doing. I'm hoping I'm explaining this well enough, but hopefully as you guys watch these more, you'll get more exposed to how these things operate as you see them more and more, and hopefully even by then you'll get a good understanding of how some of this stuff works. So that's all the setup we need. As once you have this as 1, this as 2, this is 3, and this as 4, or whatever assortment you want to do. You don't have to go, like this. You basically want to align the paragraphs with the buttons for the instance values. That is what we're doing. And I'll show you why that is. So now we'll go to our event list editor, and we're going to make a new condition. And all it's going to do, all it's going to be, if we go to storyboard controls, is start a frame. Now this is actually one of the first things you usually want to do is make a start a frame event, because there's usually some stuff you want to have just happen right at the beginning before you do any of this stuff. But that doesn't really matter right now because it's a tutorial and who cares. So now we're going to insert an action and we're going to go to the buttons. So there's a good number of stuff we can alter. But what we're going to do is we're going to be changing the paragraphs of the text now to their proper text. But instead of just simply selecting one of these, we're going to be clicking on, once again, the use a calculation button that we first saw when we were using the timer events. So we're going to delete this and we are going to click on the button selection down here. So we have all of these different things. So if you wanted to like get a value from an object or something, you have all these different options here as well that you can fetch as well. Like there's a lot of stuff here. Like there's quite a bit. Like a lot of these I haven't even, like a lot of these I haven't even touched myself. So there's stuff that even I can learn with this. But anyways, click on the buttons object, and we are going to select instance value at the very bottom. And that's it. Click enter, and that's all you gotta do. So basically what this does is at the beginning of the game, it is going to check the instance value of each button, and it is going to display the paragraphs of each button that in correlation to their instance value. So watch this. Done. Just one line of code, and all the same object right here. I didn't need to make a singular new object for any of this at all. So that is, of course, just the beginning. I actually need to make this a bit wider, and that's because the custom night text needs to not look weird. Like, there we go. So that looks better. I think I should actually space this out a bit. So let me actually go ahead and change these positions real fast. So we'll do... And of course, this is the kind of thing that, you know, you can just do on your own accord. If it looked fine to you before, then good for you. But to me, I just wanted to change the spacing of this because now it looks better. All right. Well, I'd say that is probably a good place to stop. I know we didn't do too much, but I promise this is like just even getting the foundational stuff set up here. We have static that changes transparency. Freddy's twitching all over the place. We got text. We made code do coding stuff. This is how you start a game. This is basically like, even if it's just the foundational stuff. Like, who cares if it's not too much? It's a beginning, and that is sometimes all that matters. So thanks for watching. I'll try not to be terrible about my uploading schedule with this, since I'm probably going to be a lot more nonchalant with this than I was in my last tutorial. And basically what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go through each step of the process on how to make a fan game. Hopefully showing you guys cool Clickteam stuff that other tutorials haven't really touched upon. And then, once I'm done with that, once I've really shown you guys, like, the fundamentals of, like, how to make a fan game, I'm going to be showing you guys a lot more advanced stuff and a lot of things that I don't think people have made videos on yet. Like, I'm going to make videos on a lot of different objects that I like to use a lot. Like, for example, the layer object, which is very, very useful. GameJoule API, which wasn't always an object, but Universe made an object of it, and it's really cool, and it's awesome. Make an object. Even if it's just a video going over generally, like, useful objects like this and that, and yeah, just whatever I think would be really useful to show to the world. Because again, like I said, a lot of people probably don't know about most of this stuff. Like custom cursor would be really cool. I'm sure most people probably don't know how to do that either. So yeah, just all that stuff. Like a lot of people kind of give Clickteam some shit for not being a very powerful software, but it's only gotten that like name because most people don't actually understand a lot of what it's actually capable of because they're like, "Oh, well you can only do this and this and that and that's all you can do with the engine. It's so bad." Like, yeah, only because you didn't experiment enough with the engine to really push it to its limits. Like, you don't challenge yourself, that is why you think that it is not good. So, anyways, uh again, a lot of this is going to be me encouraging experimentation and encouraging people to just look out for stuff and try not to limit themselves to just only doing specific things and techniques. It's really helpful, I think. So, anyways, thanks for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one.